Verse 6 of Surah Ibrahim tells us about the conversation that Musa was having with his people after they were saved from the tyranny of the Pharaoh. The verse of the Quran tells us that Musa turned to his people and he said, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِقَوْمِهِ اذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذْ أَنْجَاكُمْ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَسُومُونَكُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ. Remember the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on you, and remember those times when Fir'aun was punishing you heavily. وَيُذَبِّحُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ. He would slaughter your male children. وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ. And he would take your women for himself. وَفِي ذَلِكُمْ بَلَاءٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَظِيمٌ. And this big test that you guys went through. Why is Musa speaking of this to his people? Because the Quran tells us that Bani Israel, of course Bani Israel who lived during the time of Musa in particular, after they were saved from the plight of dealing with the tyranny of the Pharaoh, then all of a sudden they started to move away from Musa and move away from the message of God, and they started to do their own thing. And the Quran goes back to this part of the story of Musa over and over again, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees this pattern within the human being over and over again. And the lesson to learn from this for you and I is that when you are going through life and things are going well, you have to always remember those times where you were going through difficulty and you were begging God, you were pleading to God for something in particular, right? And then God blessed you with that thing. And now you move on with life and you start to disregard God, you start to disobey Him, you start to commit sins, and you forget this is the same God that before I was pleading to Him and begging to Him. And now it's almost as if I don't even know who He is. So the Quran says the human being can go through this much of a change. Imagine being under the tyranny of a tyrant and being saved, and then when you come out of it, you disobey the Prophet who got you out of that situation. It's almost unimaginable for us, but this is what the Quran says. This is what we as human beings are capable of. So we always have to remember, and even now when we look at our lives today, and if we're in a little bit of a more stable position, let us think back to those times where we struggled and we had difficulty and we were asking God and begging God, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed us, and now we have to remember that this is the same God. I don't want to end up like the people of Musa, who ended up disobeying a God who they were pleading to and begging from before. I think many of us saw this with the pandemic, right? During the pandemic was happening, we were so much closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking Him, pleading to Him, so on and so forth. Alhamdulillah, now the pandemic is over, and yet you find you and I will start to disobey that same God. So let us always remember that we don't become like the people of Musa, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is complaining about them, that you guys used to beg me, and when I blessed you, now you walk away like you don't even know who I am.